My name is Kim Porter. I'm the executive director and co-founder of Be a Part of the Conversation. I'm really grateful to our partners for this. This is part of our collaborative where we work with two counties. That's Bucks County has opioid settlement funds that are funding this program. We also receive funding from the Chester County Department of Drug and Alcohol Services, and another partner of ours that is supporting this program is the Hatboro-Horsham Educational Foundation, affiliated with the Hatboro-Horsham School District. So thank you very much for all of their support so that we can be with you tonight. Never charge for our programs. You can follow up on this program by visiting our website's specific page to this topic. Conversation.zone is our website. So conversation.zone/parents is where you'll find the recording and other supportive information and some other past programs that are recorded and posted on that page, as well as our YouTube channel. We have some more programs coming up. We have three for the remainder of June that are still ahead. You can find those, and we'll be sure to post upcoming programs as they are developed on that calendar, conversation.zone/calendar. I'll put all these links in the chat as soon as I'm finished sharing here. I mentioned our YouTube channel. We have more than 190 programs recorded and posted there. So I would encourage you to check that out. There's so many topics that we address that I think you'll find very interesting. So you can always take a deeper dive by visiting that YouTube channel. Again, I'll put that link in the post as well. I always like to take an opportunity to make sure that you know about some other free services that we have in addition to our community programs, which is what you're on tonight. We have parent partnership meetings. There are 21 meetings every week. We have them on Zoom. We have them in person. You can just visit this calendar on our website that has the information on these. These are all buttons that are interactive. So you click on the purple buttons to learn about in-person meetings and the green buttons to learn about program meetings that are online on Zoom. You'll find the link if it's on Zoom. You'll find the address if it's in person. So please take advantage of those. Those are for parents whose child at any age or at any stage in their substance use are having some kind of issue with substance use, and you would like to connect with other parents like me. I have a son who's been in recovery for many, many years now, and that's what brought me into this work. And there's so many other parents like myself who lead these groups and who attend these groups, and we support each other all the time. It's really beautiful. We also have something called the Family Recovery Course. This is also completely free to attend. It's a 3-part course that is led by I'm one of 18 instructors, and so there are 2 of us for each course. This is specifically for parents, guardians, and grandparents whose child, again, at any age, is struggling with substance use or has struggled with substance use. So this is not prevention. This is like, we're dealing with this. We need help to understand it and know how to best support ourselves, because we family members need our own kind of recovery as we navigate this. So that information can be found on our website as well. But again, all of this is free to attend. So I am so excited to tell you about our guest. This is Tara's first time with Be a Part of the Conversation. So welcome, Tara. Tara Cooper is an outpatient therapist with Care and Treatment Center. She works with teens and adults to help them better understand substance use disorder and co-occurring mental health challenges, and to transform their lives as they move forward. Through group facilitation, individual counseling, and case management, Tara helps patients work through their challenges, recognize their strengths, and build confidence and resilience. So excellent. So glad you're with us, Tara.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It really is an honor. It's a pleasure. I'm really excited to have a conversation tonight. So what I would like to do, I am going to share my screen so you guys can all see what I'm talking about. And I also will give an introduction, a more introduction about where, I'm coming from as far as type of work that I do. I do see my actual supervisor and my clinical supervisor, Dr. St. James, is on here, so that's exciting. Let me just share my screen. Okay, can everyone see that okay?
Perfect.
Okay, all right. Oops. All right, so just a brief introduction. I did do an introduction. I'm not used to really talking about myself in this capacity, but I'll give you my background. So I started in the field doing ABA work, that's applied behavior analysis. I really started working with younger children, really intense behaviors, and I got more into mental health, doing family-based programming with at-risk youth. Um, Through that, I did even more work in mental health as far as youth, children, adolescents, and also with their families doing children's crisis work in the IBS programming in Philadelphia County. I've also worked out in Montgomery County and Bucks County as well, and through Karen now also Berks County. As far as additional background, I've worked as far as teens, families, across different settings, including residential, outpatient, group settings as such now that I'm doing with Karen. So, I've been in the field for a while. This topic that we're talking about tonight really is, um, it's a big topic. It's a big conversation across many households, across clinical settings. It's really important and and it needs to be had. So, yeah, so we're going to have a conversation tonight. Okay. All right. So the goals for tonight, we're going to define substance use and process disorders. So I know this conversation mainly is about process behavior disorders, but I still wanted to include substance use disorders because a lot of times they overlap. We'll look at some statistics. We'll compare and contrast between different types of addictions. We'll explore most common types of process disorders, and then we'll, continue to have a conversation about what treatment looks like, how to recognize, how to have certain conversations, and just how to support your child. And then we'll do question and answers from there. Okay. So I wanted to start with a video. So there'll be a few videos. I like to incorporate different, not just talking the whole time, but other types of media. So I just want to give you a general background as far as how addiction works in the young mind. Okay. Hopefully you can hear. Let me know if you cannot hear the sound.
Have you ever heard someone joke about being addicted to chocolate? Unfortunately, the reality of addiction is no joke. An addiction can be to a substance, like drugs or alcohol, or to a behavior, like playing video games. So, what is the difference between really liking something and being addicted? The difference lies in three main things: obsessive thoughts, feeling like you can't stop, and continuing to use or do that substance or behavior despite having negative consequences. Meet Tony. He really likes video games and plays them every day. At first, he kept up with his grades, but started doing less of his homework. Then he started staying up later and later to play. This caused him to be exhausted at school. When his parents tried to get him to stop playing so much, Tony got very angry, which wasn't like him. He started skipping school, so Tony's parents had him talk to a counselor. He didn't want to at first, but things slowly started getting better. The real Tony returned when he got some balance back in his life and reconnected with those around him. So, how does someone become addicted? Why can't they just stop? Sometimes a person starts using a substance or behavior to fit in. Other times, it's to ease the pain from a traumatic experience or mental health issues. It also has to do with how the brain works. When you do something that feels good or exciting, like eating ice cream, the pleasure pathways in your brain are activated and feel good chemicals are released. This same pleasure pathway is activated when you consume drugs or alcohol. Over time, the pathways in your brain get used to having this thing in your life, which can make it really hard to stop. If you feel like you just can't stop doing something, you're not alone. With the help of a counselor, you can begin to work to get your brain back from being hijacked. It will take time for your brain to create new pathways, but you can get back on track and find some peace in your life.
Okay, so while that was mainly for substance use, that also applies to different process addictions, which we will define. So in the video, it talked about three components. So I would like to actually talk about four. Let me just get out of this. So tonight we're going to talk about the 4 C's of addiction. So there's 4 different components that you want to consider when thinking if something is an actual addiction, or is it something that is being used but not so much at that level. So there's compulsion, so the behavior and habits become more intense. It's harder to control. And along with that, as far as control, you're not able to set boundaries, set healthy boundaries. It's really hard to kind of be able to determine, how to use something in moderation. Craving, intense thoughts to use or engage in whatever that may be, whether it's an actual substance you're putting in your body or engaging in another behavior as well. And then consequences. So what happens after, engaging in a substance? How does that affect relationships, school, work, other important areas, whether it's sports? What happens? How does that affect a person's functioning? Okay. So first we'll talk about substance use disorders. So substance use as compared to process or behavior disorders. Substance is something that has to enter your body orally, inhalation, injection, something that affects you, that you put in your body and also affects your mind and how you function. They do pose a significant risk to psychological and physical health. From up to the point where it's severe illness or even death. Common use substances amongst teens are alcohol, marijuana, opioids and opiates, stimulants, hallucinogens as well. Hallucinogens is something that I have seen more of over the past several years. So that is something that I wanted to make sure I included. So just kind of give some statistics as far as actual substances. I'm not going to go through every single one because I do want to get to the other stuff as well. But just some, interesting statistics that I have found. 50% of teenagers have abused a drug at least once in their lifetime, as well as 2.08 million 12 to 17-year-olds nationwide report using drugs in the past month. So this study that I'm reading from, this is a report that was done in 2023 that I pulled up from this year. Okay, so it's not currently this year, but this is a report that was done leading up to this point. Okay. So as far as 591,000 teenagers aged 12 to 17 have used an illicit drug or other than marijuana in the past month. So, there are marijuana, cannabis is a frequent one, more frequently used, but there are other things that teens are using. Okay. Okay, so across the United States, you see the little country here. So 12.78% of all 12 and 17-year-olds report using marijuana in the last year. 0.42% of all 12 and 17-year-olds also report using cocaine in the last year. Other substances mentioned, 0.017% as far as use of methamphetamines, even less is use heroin. So while we are going to talk about process addictions, substance use also plays a heavy role into that as well. Okay, so in PA. What I've seen actually has smaller or lesser statistics than other states that I've seen. Teenagers in PA are 13.33% less likely to have used drugs more recently. Of course, it says here 66,000 12 to 17-year-olds report use of drugs. Of course, 84.85% report using marijuana. So as I said before, marijuana is that most frequently used one. I'm pretty sure many of you have heard as we've been growing up, marijuana is the gateway drug, but that is, more frequently used. So before we get into talking about behavioral addictions, I do want to also play this additional video to kind of leeway into that. I really am looking forward to a more intense discussion about what that looks like, the benefits and consequences of using things like internet, social media, things of that nature. But I do want to play this for you as well. Okay.
Do you know how much time 11 to 15-year-old in the US spends in front of an entertainment device in a day? Hi, I'm Dr. Mithika Kanabar. I'm an addiction medicine, lifestyle medicine, and family medicine physician practicing in Southern California, and really happy to be a part of the UCI team. The answer for the question I just asked is 9 hours. Can you imagine 9 hours? How many hours does it make in a week, in a year, in a lifetime? Staggering, isn't it? Well, today I would love to talk about one of my favorite topics in addiction medicine, that is process addiction. What is process addiction? It's also known as behavioral addiction. Behavioral addictions or process addictions are essentially thought of as non substance addiction. So when we think of the word addiction, we generally think of a substance, correct? It's either alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, so on. However, there are certain behaviors that can also give you that dopamine hit that can be addictive in itself. And those are called as process addictions. Now, wait a minute. Then how do you even think about that? Is it even classified in any certain way? Yes and no. So gambling disorders have always been recognized for a very long time, whether it was a DSM-4 or DSM-5. The nomenclature changed a little bit, but they have been recognized for a while. There are some treatments available and lots of data out there. The newer things that we see, such as, spending too much time on your phones, too much time on the internet, those are more gray areas. There are certain specific ones that have emerged, such as gaming disorder. Now, what's interesting about the gaming disorder is that it's not recognized by DSM-5 as of yet, but recently the World Health Organization actually recognized it as an entity, and it has become a part of ICD-11, or the International Classification of Diseases, 11th edition. Currently, we in the US, we use the 10th edition, so that's why we haven't heard too much about it. And there are not many centers available for help, but that will change in the coming years since it is a frequently asked topic, especially those of us who work in the field of addiction. Like you go to any social gathering, is going to be like, Doc, how do I get my children off their screens? And the answer is a little long, and we'll get to that.
So I want to explore that a little bit more, just because there is a lot of gray area when talking about treatment for process disorders. Like in the video, it is not recognized across all entities as far as diagnosing and treatment. So as far as treatment and mental health organizations, we use the Diagnostic Statistics Manual, the DSM-5, to diagnose. So within the DSM-5, there are some things that are recognized, including gambling disorders, disordered eating. However, things such as, social media, spending, gambling is in there. Spending, some of the other ones that I will talk about today are not recognized. But however, it is, there are some other ones recognized through the ICD-11, which includes social media spending and whatnot. So the conversation is there. There is a lot of research being done. There's more conversations being had as far as the APA to have those things included, because it is becoming more and more of an issue. More conversations are being had. With that, though, comes more conversation as far as, is it really addiction, the stigma around it? So there's a lot that is being said and is going into as far as diagnosing, but they are still there, and there are ways to categorize in order for someone to receive treatment. Okay. So you will hear me I might go back and forth today between behavioral or process addictions. However, process, building onto behavioral. I want to make sure that it's clear between behavioral and substance use. Behavioral, I want to say, if that's something that you're not ingesting, a non-substance, okay? So significant compulsive disorder, behaviors affecting impulse. It's all behavior. As far as with behavior addiction disorders, sometimes it is harder to monitor, diagnose, just because it's not something like you can take a urine screen or a drug test and say, okay, this is the problem, this is what's happening. Now we can go ahead and treat. Sometimes, there are gray areas, but there are still ways to assess for that. If you go, speak to psychiatrists, mental health specialists, a licensed mental health specialist, you can look into that, okay? Just as with substance use disorders, Psychological distress and in fact impact on daily functioning is also occurs just as it would be for substance use disorders. So what I would like to include as far as a list of what that might look like. So gambling, I categorize internet and screens because you have social media, gaming, smartphones, online shopping, online gambling, and betting as well. There are exercise, shopping, aside from being online, pornography, food and eating, work and school, and thrill seeking. So these are some additional behavioral disorders or behaviors that can become addictions. I know we will have time for question and answer, but I'm just curious if anyone is aware of most of these or, has had conversations about these being addictions. And you can speak up. No one? Okay. Well, we'll get more into what that looks like.
Tara,
Yes.
hi. I'm sorry I'm late. My name's Maria. Hi. So I know when my daughter was an inpatient, she started having like addiction to exercise and then not eating. So that became in place of the substance. So, and I also at one point it was bulimia that she was throwing up in place of using. So I see what you're saying, that how these things can become addictive in place of, but luckily we got it under control, both of them.
Good to hear. Yes. Sometimes it's not clear. It happens quickly sometimes where a person is looking to cope and find other ways to get around using whatever their substance of choice may have been. And then you get, further into, okay, I like this activity, I like doing it, this makes me feel good. And then going further into it. So other addictions do occur. So a lot of times during assessment, we will ask, are there any other compulsive disorders or compulsions that you do experience? Exercise is a big one. People will say, okay, I want to work out, I want to get healthier, as opposed to drinking, but then you can kind of go down a rabbit hole that way too. So that's something to pay attention to. Mhm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes. So I do want to get a lot into internet addictions. As I said on the previous slide, you have gaming, gambling, information seeking as well, social media and cyber relationships, and cyber sex. So a lot of these things kind of overlap in a way. Sometimes you have gaming, but then in gaming could be like a social network type thing where people are talking between different games. So then that's a form of socializing, and then you're getting more input from that, and then it goes further. So sometimes a lot of these will overlap. Of course, we see as far as the information seeking, going on the internet, and just I won't say it's like OCD, but a lot of times it is stemmed from anxiety, finding information to maybe solve a problem. Internet addiction is most prevalent amongst young people and adolescents. So you see those habits forming earlier, and then going into adulthood. I will say the generations are different. So depending on what generation any of you guys may have been, we've seen it where was a time before computers and internet and electronics. So we were able to learn lifestyle before that, but now we live in a culture where everything's electronic. So how do you get around that? Children are introduced to electronics, internet, and things at a very young age. So that is something to keep in consideration. As far as the internet, and I've seen a lot of this and had a lot of this conversation during the COVID-19 pandemic when everyone was on lockdown. Internet addiction. The internet becomes a virtual environment, offers less social pressure for some people who may struggle with social interactions with in-person, like person-to-person interactions. So those who may have issues in that area may be more susceptible to internet addiction. But with that also could lead to being bullied or bullying others as well. So I do have some statistics over here, as far as just in general, Americans going online. This says the percent of adults in each group who say they may go online constantly. So I don't know how many of you do this, but you wake up, you have your phone in your bed, or you have your phone somewhere in your room. First thing you might do, hopefully not all the time, is you might look on your phone. Depending on how busy your day, you might look into your email. So or you might waiting for email. So you wake up and say, let me check my email. So people are on phones a lot. Me personally, I had a job where I literally had to check my phone all the time. I was on call. I had parents, connecting with parents, school. So I was always on my phone. And then you go home and you want to relax and be on social media. However, the screens are always there. So this kind of just gives a breakdown of what that looks like, not only just for teens, but for different generations and demographics as well. So just as you would experience withdrawal with substances, that is also possible with behavioral addictions. So, I know in some households, you may be trying to set boundaries as far as, okay, I need you to be off this internet at a certain time, or you're putting limits on certain things that could become excessive behaviors. You might start to see withdrawal symptoms. So you might see moodiness. Now with teens, of course, there's hormones, so there is that in play, but moodiness might be more than normal. You may have nervousness, anxiety, depression, irritability. Anytime you are setting a boundary or something and you're removing something that has a significant effect on the brain, the brain is going to react. It's going to, it's missing something that it was feeding it. The brain is going to react. Sometimes teens are not aware of how they're reacting, how they're responding. They may not know how that feels. They just know that it's different. They need something that was making them feel good, whether it's a substance or a behavior or an activity they engage in that is possible. So if someone is having a conversation, well, I didn't know withdrawal was possible. Withdrawal is very much possible with this. With withdrawing from behavior addictions. Along with that, something to watch out for also is depression. Sometimes when it may happen, not saying in every case, just, monitoring, where moods go. Because if something that high of a value for a specific individual or, adolescent is taking away and they don't have something to balance that out, intense feelings of like loneliness, depression may occur. You might have some self-harm or suicidal ideation. Not saying that it's in every case, but that is possible. That also would indicate, there's some withdrawal happening on some level for a teen. Okay. Are there any questions or comments so far? So let's get into predicting factors to take into consideration. So with adolescents and teens, so up through even up through young adulthood, up through age 25, an individual, a child, a youth their brain is building. What happens in your brain is you're building. Your brain is physically, developing to the point where you can make healthy decisions, balance, regulate your emotions. It's not all there yet until you're about 25 years old. So if a child, youth, adolescent has trouble with being able to regulate their emotions, whatever, if there's a developmental issue there, not having a strong ability to regulate your emotions is a predictive factor in, developing a behavioral addiction. Age, so, like I said before, the younger generation is more susceptible. They are more susceptible to developing some of these things. They don't know how to fully filter, monitor, balance, make certain decisions as we would as adults. We've had that experience, but they're learning that. Gender, culture, other comorbidities. So if there's other things that are present, like anxiety, depression, other things like ADHD, any other, mental health disorders, that is also a predictor of a possibility of a youth being, developing a behavioral addiction, a process addiction. Co-occurrence of other addictions. I know we were just speaking not too long ago, if there is other substance use, if there is another addiction of any kind. So let's say there is this disordered eating, and you know that a person goes under treatment for that, but then develops another addiction. If there's addictive personality, some way, shape, or form, or if that is in your in your family and your genetics, that is a predictive factor as well. Okay. Also including that view of self and self-esteem. So how you view yourself, how your teens use themselves. Their self-concept also plays a factor into that. Other factors include the environment. This is one that some people fail to consider. So depending on where you are, so let's take the pandemic for example. A lot of people, teens especially, did not have outlets to go different places or do different things. So with that being said, let's take the internet addiction, for example. What other ways do you have to socialize with someone other than the internet because you couldn't go outside, right? Depending on what area you're from, some areas are not safe. So it's easier to stay inside and, play games or do what have you inside versus going out and doing other things that may balance out your life. It's a safety thing for some people. Routine and structure and within the home. So if it's a home that may be more chaotic, where structure may not, may be harder to, it may be harder to, pin down a routine. That also is another factor because, of course, we have to teach our young people balance. Balance is a part of that. So if balance is not present in the home, not saying that this will happen, but that is part, that does play a role in that. Stressors and presence, and their presence of trauma. So young people stress a lot, believe it or not. They stress, whether it's trying to form relationships with other people, stress about, how they may look and developing their sense of self, their identity, expectations put on from parents, schools, friends. All these stressors may lead a teen to, cope in other ways. And then, they may get, some type of fulfillment, reward, the brain receives a reward in a way. And then, behaviors take off from that. Like I said before, also COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of things, were really came to the forefront, were put under a magnifying glass as to what was really happening, what's really happening with a lot of our young people. Okay. So commonalities across different types of addictions. Right here, we're talking about behavioral addiction. So loss of behavioral control. Process addictions and substance use addictions develop similarly and follow the same patterns. So it might start off, something small. It might be experimenting. It might be a way of coping, but then develops into something bigger, and then eventually, behaviors build on each other, and then you establish a level of dependence. So they parallel each other. Like I said before, things are connected to other mental health disorders, and adolescents are most influential and most at risk of developing an addiction, just because of not only their brain development, but just where they are in life. They're learning from peers, they're learning from things around them, they're soaking in everything, even though they're not like a 5-year-old just soaking up little things. They're still learning how to process the world around them. Like I said before, they may not know how to cope, but they're going to find a way to cope if they feel stressed, whether it's showing out behaviorally or, leaning into an activity or some type of engaging in some type of behavior. So just as substance use disorders, it becomes it initially is pleasurable, but over time with that dependence, it's motivated by negative reinforcement. So as far as, let's talk like behavioral science. So negative reinforcement, what happens is you do something to take away an uncomfortable feeling. You want that feeling removed. So you are engaging in something for that to be removed. And once that happens, your brain picks up like, oh, I can do this. This feels good. I feel better now that I'm experiencing this. I want to keep doing this so that, I don't have to experience that uncomfortable feeling, or I don't have to experience, how we said, withdrawal. That may happen. So that's what negative reinforcement becomes. So sometimes it gets to a point where children cannot control it. Sometimes, might be the question, why can't you do this? Or, it's easy to stop that, just as with substance use. The same thing with behavior disorder. Same thing with disordered eating, same thing with spending. All these things target the same processes in your brain. Okay. So I would like to talk about similarities also with just some of the stigma that occurs, some of the things that teens may experience when it comes to these addictions. Now, so not only are they demonstrating impulsivity, right? They may experience anxiety, increased anxiety and shame, isolation and guilt, maybe wanting to stop, or maybe recognizing something is not right. And they experience these things, embarrassment, different moods, depression, that sometimes that does set in when they may be trying, they recognize that there's an issue, or you as a parent, provider, teacher, someone who supports a child, recognizes something, having that conversation, a child having that conversation with an adult, some of these things also may come up. So what are some things to ask yourself as far as behavior disorders? So some of the questions you might ask similarly to substance use disorder: how much time is someone spending on a behavior in comparison to other activities? That's something, is it impacting their daily functioning? So how's it impacting school? Other activities, if a teen is working, how's that affecting their ability to engage in that? Whatever obligations, even just how they're performing at home, how are they managing at home, are they cleaning their room, are they doing things? So some of these are indicative of something that may be happening for them, something that may not be healthy. Is this a way to cope or avoid different difficult emotions? A lot of times young people know that they're experiencing something, but they don't know how to put a name to it. They know they're feeling something. They know it's a survival mechanism, not only just for teens, but also for ourselves as well. We will find a way to cope with something. If they're not taught, okay, this is what you can do, this is a healthy balance, things can, get out of hand sometimes. Have you noticed how they, spend most of their time engaging, either engaging in behavior or, thinking or talking about it? Does it become almost like an obsession? Does it take over their life? That's something to think, ask yourself. I will also say too, these are questions that you can have with a child, whether it's a student, whether it's your own child, niece, nephew, grandchild. You can sometimes have these conversations. So children are smarter than we think. They are capable of having these conversations, but we support them. I am a big proponent of giving this language. I don't have a teen. A little personal disclosure, I have a young person, a young child, not a teen yet. But even at young ages, 3 and 4, you start to give that language for them to be able to, answer some of these questions. Do you think that this may be a little much, asking them a question, giving them the ability to kind of think and process that on their own, instead of saying, okay, well, you're doing this too much, you need to stop. They're not always going to register that that's what they need to do and what's happening. So having these conversations often, not only thinking this to yourself, but seeing like what they think as well as what's happening. How does behavior impact other relationships? Are they, did they stop hanging out with certain friends? Are they picking up different friends that may not be, as good of an influence for them? So, assessing what the relationships may look like. You may ask a teen, what's going on with your friends? Are you still hanging out with them? Do you think that's okay that, these things are happening? Or do you want that to happen? That's another question to kind of keep in your mind. As well as that, does it have a negative effect on their mood or physical well-being? Are, let's say internet, are they eating? It may get to the point where they're doing certain things. They may forget that they need to eat. Not saying they may be intentionally not eating, but being so involved in something that they may be forgetting to take care of their basic needs. Are you taking care of yourself? Are you, taking care of basic hygiene? Are you dressing yourself? Are you doing your hair? Are you getting out of bed the way you need to? Their affect, their mood, just the way they're taking care of themselves is also indicative something may be happening. Sometimes, a child may hide what's happening. They may say, they may minimize it. So paying attention to that. So while we have these conversations, embarrassment is a factor. Once a person is embarrassed, they may either go inward, or they may, lash outward and, kind of resist. It may seem as resistance, but there's something underneath of that they may be experiencing. So take that into consideration as well. Has anyone, has the youth tried to cut back, and are struggling with that? Have you noticed, okay, they tried to cut back, but it's amping up again, continuing that conversation. More questions to ask yourself, or just continue to have the conversation with your family, your teen, your family, people in your household who can be supportive. Are they unable to, when they're unable to engage in activity, what is happening for them? Are they aware of these things happening for them? So, it may not be coming to them from a judgmental standpoint, but asking them, do you feel okay? Do you physically feel okay? Do you, how do you feel, in your body? Do you feel tired? Do you feel, do you want this to be this much? Is there something else that's happening that, is maybe masking? Okay. Before I go to the next slide, has anyone else, taken the time, maybe ask some of these questions to themselves or had this conversation with someone that, a young person that they support? Well, keep these in mind, okay? Treatment. So as I said before, as I began this presentation, identifying a specific, disorder or something that's happening, a diagnosis may not, if someone's seeking a diagnosis, you may not get a specific diagnosis. But, seeking a professional help. So going to be assessed, seeking whether it's a psychologist, a licensed mental, health professional, taking that step to be assessed to see, okay, what can be done? What other help can I get? So it might be individual behavioral interventions. So be individual therapy, family therapy. So for any young person, I strongly suggest family involvement. A child, let alone anyone for the matter, we can't do life on our own. So think about a child who is younger, who may not have all the tools that we may have as an adult. They can't do it on their own. They may say, okay, I have this. However, family involvement, parent support, whoever supports them the most, that is necessary. So, and there maybe you might encourage someone to seek individual therapy. It's always good to have some type of family involvement as well. Just because, they may go to a session once a week, but all the other work outside of that needs to take place. So we all need to be involved in that treatment and for it to be very collaborative as well. So some modalities of treatment, you have cognitive behavior therapy, which is CBT, DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, also addiction recovery programming. So a lot of these modalities, these treatment programs, they focus on supporting individuals, youth with the tools to not only know what's happening with thoughts they're having around whether addiction or any underlying, issues they may be having, but also learning healthy coping. So dialectical behavior therapy is one where it really leans into coping with really intense feelings. So whether, people go, they experience DBT treatment for substance use, they may experience it for trauma. They may go to it for trauma. They may go to it for, they may, have some level of DBT and CBT for disordered eating, shopping, these things, anything that is inducing a very intense reaction to something, a thought, an experience, and it's leading to an intense behavior. These are behavior interventions that can help as well. Behavior contingencies. So, it might not, a lot of times with treatment, you think, okay, especially with behavioral stuff, abstinence is key. That is a very gray area, especially with a lot of the, addictions with teens that are increasing, especially internet, their access is everywhere. So how do you mitigate that? So behavior contingencies, balance. So with that, it may be kind of offsetting, one thing and, having reward for engaging in other things. And, so that helps with balance, behavior modification, and other evidence-based treatments. So it is important, yes, we can treat a specific disorder, but beyond that, you want to look at symptoms, behaviors, how to help a child, a teen to adapt in a healthy way. So a lot of times addiction is maladaptive behavior. So it's a form of coping. People cope. However, it's not a healthy form. It's maladaptive. Um, Pharmacological and medication-assisted treatment. So people do take medication just as you would for anxiety, depression, other substance use disorders, right? You can look into medication, talk to a psychiatrist, talk to a doctor, say, okay, you know what? There may be additional support that could be used in addition to therapy that could help, it may not be long-term. It may not be maybe a short-term thing. It doesn't have to be long-term, but that is something to consider. It is another tool. There is stigma around it. However, if you're wanting a young child to develop certain tools and be able to withstand uncomfortable feelings, they may need a little bit more to help get to that point, to help build those skills. So that is something to consider. Peer programming. Oh, got that. My little I mistyped. But peer programming. Yeah, so children learn from their peers. So there may be groups that, adolescents can be a part of. It may be at school. There may be small groups at school that they can be a part of. And it does not have to be specific addiction treatment. So it could be looking into other programming that may support with building coping. Not related to this, but just recently, the other day, I was driving down the road and I saw a camp that's going up this summer, towards the end of the summer, for children to learn mindfulness. I was like, oh, a mindfulness camp. I have never in my years heard of a mindfulness camp. So there's different programming, and you'll be around other kids. They learn from kids. They see other people who can relate to them, just as you would if you were going to a drug and alcohol group. Same thing with peer programming. So that is out there. There are a number of groups and 12-step programs that sometimes we don't realize are out there. So I have listed here Computer Gaming Addicts Anonymous, Internet and Technology Addicts Anonymous, Sex Addicts Anonymous, Sexaholics, Gamblers, Overeaters. There is something for many of these behavioral addictions that I've been talking about. So they're out there. Sometimes they're not out there, in plain sight, but things like, as far, organizations like Be Part of the Conversation offer resources and whatnot where you can connect with other people. I know that there's weekly meetings and conversations that happen for people to connect, for different reasons. There are resources. So looking into groups, 12-step programs, peer programming, in addition to formal structured treatment. For some things, even though I was talking about, internet and technology, there are technology-based interventions. So there's blocks and filters and monitoring for certain things. It may not be, okay, you have a person to give a urine sample, but you may be able to say, okay, I have an app on my phone to see what my child is doing. Or they may have an app on their phone to monitor, okay, making sure that they're taking care of their basic needs. So there's ways that you can get creative with using technology-based interventions. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. As I said before I move on to with behavioral and process addictions, access and exposure and repeated exposure is something that probably is one of the most difficult things, because a lot of times those things are seen everywhere. So let's say gambling and gaming. Everywhere you go, you're seeing something, whether you're walking into a store, you see commercials. There's a lot of commercials now, as far as like internet betting, there's sports betting and college and whatnot. It is difficult. However, working and collaborating, you can definitely reduce some of these things and support your teen with a lot of these behaviors. So things to be mindful of with process addictions, based on, they are based on intense and excessive behavior prowess, taking place outside of societal norms, excuse me. But we have to be careful about pathologizing. So as I said before, sometimes we may, it may be like an old school, new school type thing where we may not as adults understand, a teen's interest in a certain thing and may see, okay, this is a problem, right? So just be careful of, the questions that I asked, previous, and talked about the four C's. The four C's, those are things to consider when saying, okay, is this an addiction or is this like a strong interest? How do I go about approaching this? So, be mindful of, okay, saying, okay, this is an addiction. Ask those questions, collaborate with someone, talk to a professional to see, okay, is this an issue or am I thinking about it differently? So perspective, like I said before, teen perspective is different from the adult perspective. Teens have a voice. They do want to be understood. Sometimes it's difficult because we're trying to keep them healthy and safe. However, we still have to work to figure out, okay, we were young people once. We had our interests. We dove into some things, being more understanding of, what may be happening for a teen is what I would emphasize and encourage for you. A lot of times, one thing to take into consideration as far as a teen perspective, as I said before, is brain development. Our expectations, with being mindful of the expectations we may have and the boundaries that we may set for a teen and how they may respond. Be mindful that a response when setting a boundary is when setting a boundary, you may have a more intense reaction because the teen may not be able to, or younger, your preteen, younger people may not be able to regulate their emotions and respond. We would think they may respond. So maybe a big reaction, especially if you're changing a behavior and trying to get them to do new behaviors, you're going to get a kickback. That's something that you should expect. Okay. So yes, it's not just the teens, but us as adults, as parents, there is work for us to be done as well in this. So we can't just put it all on the teen to do the work. So supporting your child. So how do we do that? How do you have conversations? How do you do this? So examining, assessing like what the structure and routine looks like in your home. How do you model and to talk about healthy living and balance? How is that taught in your home? How do they see that? Where do they see that? That's something, that's a way that you can support your child with a lot of these behavioral and process addictions. So let's say for eating is a big topic, taking care of your body, right? Talking about, self-image, these things when teens definitely are more influential. They'll dive into it. They may hear something at school. So talking about balance and having real conversations, giving them a space to actually talk about, okay, what is balance? What does that mean for them? So effective communication and collaboration. So listening without judgment. Listen first and be collaborative as much as you can when supporting your child. I know that sometimes there may not always be a case where you might have to step in and, take matters to the point where, okay, this is an issue. I need to take them, keep them safe. However, being collaborative as you can with your child or with the child that you're supporting is helpful. So if there is one thing that you're wanting a teen to shift from or change a behavior, you're going to want to look into additional outlets. If there is a specific addiction, initially nothing is going to be compared to that. In their mind, nothing is going to compare. You may suggest A, B, and C as opposed to, okay, scrolling on social media. They might not initially see the value of other outlets, but incorporating that into, let's say, your routine and structure of your home, giving a lot of access to that, really supporting, a teen in that is something that's the way you could support your child. Considering a teen's needs and perspective. So I think needs are important to consider. So let's say if it is, let's say a teen is involved in sports, and they are needed taking care of their body a certain way. But you do see something going down the road as a disordered eating, you have to consider, okay, what's happening here? How can I support that? socially. Those internet, the things on the internet, a lot of times this day and age, you're not seeing kids and teens outside going to the mall, playing in trees, going outside, hanging out, and, things are not safe these days. So how can you support them in providing a safe and healthy outlet that they need? If they're going online and they're scrolling, okay, let's sit down and talk about, what are some things that, I will, be open to you being exposed to, like certain, groups of people that they may follow versus something that you don't want them to see. So be open as far as that, as their needs. What are they asking for? If they're really struggling with social interaction with other people, okay, fine. You can have a social interaction to a certain extent, but then how can we get you to have social interaction where you feel safe and comfortable and develop those skills in other ways as well? Um, Okay, so as far as that, that does bring me to the end of that specific part of my presentation. Just as far as programming, where I'm coming from, there is teen programming here at Karen for substance use. There is, as far as the site that I work at Women's Meeting, not so much as far as behavioral addictions. However, there is mental health programming at other sites for Karen as well. Okay. Um, so I do just want to, what time is it? Oh, it's 8 o'clock. So I want to open up the floor for questions and answers and comments and just really have this conversation as far as like where you guys are at with, process addictions, teens, how you're supporting your child or whoever you may be supporting, where you at with these things. What is your experience? And I'm just going to, I'll go through this so you can see. I will, Kim, if it's possible for me to send you some links to distribute to the rest of the group too.
Sure, of course.
I will make sure that you guys have some of this information. There is a lot of information on the Karen website as far as like what, defining what a lot of these addictions are, treatment, as well. Okay.
Perry, you're welcome to put those links in the chat if you're able to. I don't know if you're able to copy and paste
Okay.
your
All
slide
right.
deck.
All right. I guess I'll stop sharing my screen so we can talk and have a conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that. That was really comprehensive. And I do definitely have some follow-up questions, but I wanted to defer to the group and see if anyone wants to unmute and ask a question or raise your hand or put something in the chat.
I would say, as far as beginning that conversation, of course, yes, reaching out to the resources. Um, it may not be talking directly about a specific issue directly first, but kind of just creating that space for your daughter to come to you and like, for you guys to talk. Are there other things that you guys talk about just in general that she may be willing to sit down with you to see where she's at?
And I'd like to add to that, we struggle with this all the time, we parents, that, and exactly what you described is what I certainly experienced with my child when he was addicted to drugs and alcohol. Me trying to get closer to him, which is my natural inclination as a parent, of course, is I want to want to make sure he understands what's really happening to himself. Like, don't you see? Don't you understand? This is what I'm seeing. And of course, that what happens then is the closer I get to him, the further away from me he wants to be, because I'm now becoming this barrier to him to continue to do the thing that he feels he needs to keep going. Like, this has become his coping mechanism. It's maladaptive, as Tara explained. It's unhealthy. It's not what we want to see them doing, but it is what they have in that moment, and we are seen as a barrier to them. And so, yeah, we're often, as the parents who love them more than anyone in their lives, probably, are sometimes the very last person that they want to be talking to about this, because I feel like we almost represent a mirror for our child. So if they're feeling any kind of shame about what they're struggling with, looking at their parent with that at least my face was always filled with angst or fear, a lot of fear, sadness, and all of that. And that was not a pleasant experience for my child, of course. And so, probably when I was trying to talk to him about his substance use in his case, he was probably thinking, like, I just need to go get high right now. So, what we finally had to do was, turn to a professional and say, this is way past our scope of ability here. This is that I'm the parent. I'm not their therapist. I'm not able to really fully understand that. Even if I happen to be I'm not a therapist, but if I were, I'm still not the person to really help or treat or convince my child of some of these things. So any opportunity to be with an objective professional is really, really beneficial. And it might even sound something like, this is something that I don't fully understand. So I'm going to I'm going to offer you an opportunity to talk to somebody who understands it a lot better than I do. It's not punishment, it's love, it's support.
Sometimes it's hard, and I encourage you not to take it completely personally. It is a lot of times it's an issue that they are dealing with, they see as separate. It is not a personal thing. It's more so their brain is, okay, I need to do this thing because this is what's helping me, stay afloat. It's helping me cope. It's helping me deal with whatever. It's what I've learned. So like you were saying, Kim, collaborating, speaking to a professional, creating other outlets for them. Maybe if they're not going to talk to you, there may be someone else that they can talk to where that they will get, develop some healthy behaviors, coping, and be able to talk to someone safely.
And please don't forget to get help for yourself because, as I mentioned earlier, and I'll put it in the chat again right now, we have a lot of free resources for you, as the parent. And it doesn't, we are the parents who attend these support groups, Parent Partnership and the Family Recovery Course. The parents have children of all ages, and we still manage to support each other really beautifully and seamlessly. So I hope you take advantage of those. And it doesn't matter where you live because everything that we offer has a virtual option to it.
I will say, in my experience working in like family-based programming, where I did have youth who would leave the home at night, and as far as safety, like I definitely hear it in your voice, um, just the care, concern, the worry that, not wanting something to happen to her. I think that you are at a good place where if you say you're going to, um, you guys are going to therapy, is it family therapy? Going to take time. And I know this is not probably not what you want to hear from me. And I'm glad that you're, just opening yourself up and having this conversation with other people. Finding more support for people from other parents, maybe who have experienced, children who were runaways. Um, Maybe an additional step. I think that it's hard because you want to keep your child safe here and now. You're also seeing the future, what's going to happen to her in the future. I think, from what I'm hearing from you, you're doing the best that you can. It may not be what you want to hear, but I think that you are doing a lot just in, following through with court orders, getting her, care that way, making sure she's safe in that capacity, going ahead with, couples therapy, you and your husband getting support that way. It might be at some point you might do family-based, therapy where it works with all of you guys. So this stuff is out there. Unfortunately, there's not a quick fix, also. But if she's talking about, okay, I can't wait till I'm 18, let's start. What does 18 look like then? What do you want to do when you're 18? So, um,
But first of all, I think it's wonderful that you're getting help for yourself and your spouse, for the other parent, because you're not doing everything wrong. You're doing the best that you can with a really untenable situation. And by the way, a young person can have just as much risk in their lives by living under the roof 24/7. They have access to just about everything. Unfortunately, the phone has become a DoorDash for substances, for, well, your gaming is right there, all that kind of stuff. So lots of things that are really unhealthy can happen to our children, even if they're in our home. And unfortunately, there's no way to bubble wrap and, our child and keep them perfectly, perfectly safe. Perhaps, I mean, even though it's certainly not what any of us would wish for, perhaps her being basically making herself homeless, from time to time, is going to kind of get her to that end point a little sooner for recognizing I need help. I've got to stop. I can't keep living like this. The discomfort will hopefully get her to surrender a lot more quickly than the comfort of just, put even that sort of failure to launch that we hear so much about with adolescents, where they're, whether it's being, using cannabis regularly, or the gaming stuff and sports betting and all that sort of things, where we just see kids really spinning their wheels. Perhaps the way these behaviors are manifesting is going to get her to that surrender, that taking direction moment a little bit more quickly. And maybe she does have that maturity and that, the certainly the skill set. You're not alone in having a child who's very intelligent and very capable, and yet struggling with this stuff. In fact, I think that many of them are more vulnerable just because they've got big hearts, they've got a lot that they've got going on in their, in their minds. And so you're absolutely not alone in this. So I hope that you will. Again, I don't mean to keep beating the drum for support groups, but any kind of Al-Anon, Nar-Anon parent partnership, because there are so many parents that are going through the same thing. You look at this child and we get so nostalgic for the way it used to be with them when they still were young and innocent. And now suddenly we see these behaviors, and it's a grieving process for us. No, none of us thought this was going to happen. And, leaving our
Right.
home, I built this, warm, safe space for you, and you don't want to be here. It's unthinkable. And yet it is the reality for so many of us, so many of us. Um, and I'm wondering too, if now, thank goodness that she is in that partial, like, is there an opportunity for you and her dad to be part of that therapeutic process at some stage, do you believe? Like, whether it's through the counselor that you and he are seeing, or
While she's in that program, you mentioned that there's trauma in the past too. Learning more about, you know, trauma responses and how a brain operates after experiencing trauma as well. So she, her brain, on top of being the adolescent brain, there's trauma. Your brain also perceives things and responds a different way to the environment as well. So learning more about that, working with her therapist and partial as far as that, and maybe doing some planning for when she does, when she's done that additional, um, I wouldn't say like wraparound type stuff, but that family-based programming, that additional where people will come to you. Those are some things to talk about with her therapist as far as planning when she's done that part of her treatment, what that looks like, and feeling empowered and like, hey, we've experienced this before. We're wanting to see something different and more long-standing. What else can we do to prepare when she's out of treatment that we can have more support in the home? You just be encouraged. You're doing the best you can. You're not going to be able to make the decisions. Your daughter is going to make her decisions at the end of the day. You're doing the best you can. So I hope that you continue to stay hopeful as well.
Shifting gears just a little bit, Tara, you mentioned, I really appreciated that you talked about, first of all, I really loved when you were talking about there's questions to ask young people. We can ask them ourselves of our own selves, but then also for our young people. And I think I just love that idea of agency, right? Allowing our young person to have some agency. And even when we're talking about screen time and that sort of thing, to have it be almost like a negotiation, I don't know if that's quite the right word, but just to have a conversation to say, like, how much time do you think you do spend on your screens? And do you want to spend on your screens? Because I really believe that most young people would rather not be completely tied to their devices, you know. And so I love that idea of having them bring in their own plan for, you know, just learning that moderation themselves, using some of those motivational interviewing techniques with them just to see if they can find their own solutions for how to back off of the devices or whatever the process behaviors, the addictions might be. But I also wanted, you mentioned that really cool mindfulness camp for this summer, which yes, sign me up. What with the summer months upon us, just about, you know, we know that this is a time that young people initiate substance use over the summer times, summer months a lot of the time, or if they don't have a lot of structure, they've got more time on their hands. Other than that awesome mindfulness camp, can you think of other ways that families can work together to kind of subvert some of that? There's places where kids can get stuck using this process.
And what I've done in the past, a lot of times leading up to the summer months, is just, having that conversation with teens, with the parents, like, hey, what are you wanting to see happen over the summer? Sometimes if you ask them, hey, what do you want to do over the summer? They're like, well, I don't know. I just want to sleep, right? Um, so, having those conversations, what are you interested? Here's some things that I found. Let's try this. Maybe you can volunteer here, or, it's difficult at the age because it's hard to find summer programming for that age group. But there are people out there looking for, volunteers, to help, I know a lot of schools do like their service learning volunteer project that they have to do all the way up through, high school. So maybe connecting with the counselors and saying like, hey, like, who are the people who provide volunteer hours? Are they doing anything for the summer that, my child might be interested in? Um, Kids like to, feel a little sense of independence. They want to have their own money. Hey, do you want to get a summer job? I'll allow you to work a few hours a week in the summer, when you have that space. But let's talk about what it looks like when school starts again. So having something of their own, something that gives them pride, they might be willing to have that conversation as well. But I'm always looking for, like, even though, I'm not, working in the same capacity as I used to a few years ago, but, like I said, like, I'll be randomly driving down the street like, oh, you know what, let me just post this on my social media because it might be something that's, a parent might be looking forward to. But, looking at places, looking on Facebook groups, looking on LinkedIn, certain things that say, about, programming for the summer in the area, going to the county websites and whatnot, whether it's Bucks, County, Montgomery, Chester, Delaware, all of them. A lot of times they will have certain things listed. There is something through Bucks County. I'll have to look and I'll share that with you too, Kim. Maybe you could share that with some other people. There's a program or initiative in Bucks County I remember that I'll have to look and find, but there are some things that I would say just getting creative as far as like and having that collaborative conversation with your child. And just being like their needs, like, listen, school is stressful. They've been up and that might be just, that might be the thing that may be leading them to cope with certain things. So they might, it might be okay if you want to sleep in the morning, okay, what are you going to do in the evening? What are some things you want to do this summer just to just to feel good, and listening and then say, okay, what can we do about that? But yeah.
Nice, thank you. Any other questions that you all have? You just have a couple minutes. Tara, there was an advanced question about from a parent saying there are other parents who are a lot more permissive, with some of this and allowing some kind of maladaptive behavior, and how wondering what advice you might have for parents to kind of get other parents on board some of the things that we've been talking about today. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Um, I think it depends where the other parents are and what's happening in their lives. So there might be a reason why they might be more permissive of certain things. So if you are a friend to a parent who is like that, and you're wanting them to, I guess adapt a certain lifestyle, um, it may not be, certain conversations may come off as judgmental, but just like having open conversations. And if it's a person that you have a relationship with it, like if you're that at that point and just be like, hey, I have concerns. Are you open to hearing some of my concerns and maybe some suggestions? So a person has to be open to hearing suggestions as well. But monitor, like modeling and just sharing. There's no, wrong with saying like, hey, I have this idea. I saw this. I thought of you. You don't have, I'm not saying for you to do A, B, or C, but, I just wanted to pass it along. We're not always going to be in a position where we might change a parent's mind or, and it's a slippery slope because sometimes people take it as, okay, well, you can't tell me how to parent, right? But still being supportive. So if someone does come to you, then that might be the opportunity to share, okay, these are some of the things that I do. How do you feel about that? You may not be able to do everything that we do in our household, but this may help for your household. So just being open, and knowing that not everyone's going to want to take advice. So just being careful of unsolicited advice, as well.
Right. I like the idea of modeling. It's basically what I do a lot of the time when I'm not I don't know if it's actually modeling or if it's just by sharing my own story. And I'll talk about times like a little bit different here, but when my son was still using substances, and today I'll tell somebody like what I did to enable that, to perpetuate that, like that I was like trying to make the consequences go away and things like that. And so when I'm being transparent and kind of use my own experience to exhibit what I'm trying to do differently, that might invite a conversation, even to say like, so what are you doing to help your child, limit their screen time or whatever the topic is that the parent's concerned about. I think the word overindulgence was the word that they use. And I also am thinking about that book, The Anxious Generation. I think half of the United States read so far that, could there be a book club discussion? Could there be just, to offer some way to have a peer group of parents talk about the kind of the challenges that they're seeing. And that's not saying I think you've got a problem. It's saying I think we need to talk about this as parents of young people. Some creative ways perhaps to spark those conversations.
And just showing empathy,
Mm.
just leading with empathy, and just understanding, a lot of times people will open up when you're saying like, this must be hard for you. Like, are you want to talk about anything? And that might open up the floodgates, as a clinician and as, outside of, clinician Tara, I take that hat off, when you lead with that, you'd be surprised, how someone might open up and it might, come to you for things or how you can help.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tara. It's really been great having you with us.